One for the Angels was the Twilight Zone's second episode. Aired a week after its pilot, Where Is Everybody? It's a story about death, an unfulfilled wish, and the consequences of playing in the street. It's a rather quaint episode, and I'm going to take my best shot looking into it, including answering questions that no one had ever asked. Written by Rod Serling and directed by Robert Parish. It starred Ed Wynn and Murray Hamilton. But before we begin, keep in mind, my analysis isn't quite embraced by enthusiasts of the series. The alternative theories mentioned within may cause anxiety, rage, and disbelief. But that's why you're here, I hope. And if you enjoy what you see here, make sure to leave a like, share, or subscribe. Now, let's take a moment and discover what makes this episode one for the Angels. Lew Bookman is a nearly 70-year-old pitchman who squeezes a living selling overhyped trinkets to anyone who would listen to him. Hint, no one does. He doesn't have a storefront and operates in public spaces with his suitcase and passes the savings on to you. He's beloved by the neighborhood children. Passing out free toys and hosting ice cream socials sort of helps. But on this day, he's caught the attention of a man in black. He's the sort who can be anywhere and nowhere at the same time. Lew soon discovers the man in black is the Grim Reaper who helped himself into Lew's apartment. No key nor lock can keep Death out. Death is a careful one with a plan and has a schedule to keep. This was the day Lew crosses over to the other side. Exactly at midnight, during his sleep. The pitchman is in disbelief, tries to reason with the intruder. Even the little girl Maggie, who has problems of her own, does not see him, because death can only be seen by those chosen to make their departure. Lew bargains with the Grim Reaper, convincing him he had one last dream to fulfill, making a pitch, one so great it would be one for the Angels. Death sympathizes and lets Lew live, but soon discovers how Lew fooled him because he has no intention of living up to his bargain, allowing him to extend his life by loophole. Dealing with the supernatural becomes a game of chess, each trying to outmaneuver the other. Death needs to find a substitute and chooses Maggie. The Grim Reaper has no soul. As darkness falls over Maggie, she too can see the man in black. She too sees her future closing in on her. Jumping out into busy traffic isn't all fun and games. The pitchman freely offers his life in exchange for Maggie's, but Death refuses. The way of the universe just doesn't work this way. Midnight, that is the departure time. Death explains, not a minute sooner, not a minute later. He waits outside, like a silent raven waiting nevermore. Meanwhile, deciding to set up shop, Lew finds the most insensitive time to break out his merchandise. Or is it? He has one audience, the man from nowhere, a customer who needs nothing more than trading souls, and hangs on Lew's every word. After showcasing his overpriced trinkets with made-up lore and backstories, Lew makes Death break into a cold sweat. The Grim Reaper buys everything Lew has to sell. While it's uncertain what he uses as currency, Death paid the price of time. Midnight came and went, and Maggie got to live another day. This is how the universe works. Death is bedazzled, almost embarrassed he didn't collect his soul. Or did he? See, when Lew gave his best performance, his best pitch, he fulfilled his part of the bargain. Lew must exit side by side with Death, taking his merchandise with him. One question few have asked. Why was Lew chosen to expire? Why did Death come to his door? The episode made clear Lew was in good health. However, if you listen carefully, the answer surfaces. Lew is a man, by his own admission, who doesn't go very far. He even says there are places in his apartment he hasn't visited yet. Lew wasn't on the brink of some profound discovery or busy with an important project. He was just a pitchman who, frankly speaking, was not very successful. Lew, like his merchandise stuffed in his suitcase, had little purpose. In other words, Lew was deadwood. Death was there to clear it out. By the Grim Reaper's demeanor, it was all thought out, reasonably planned. One easy assumption to make was Death chose to take Maggie's life out of spite for being fooled by Lew. However, Death did explain, since Lew wouldn't come with him, he was forced to find an alternative. Being a heartless soul, Death chose a little child because he knew this was Lew's weak spot. There are 2 stories, one literal. That's the one where Lew can't walk back from his agreement, and Death refuses his offer to take Maggie's place. Lew distracts Death with his once-in-a-lifetime pitch, and saves Maggie's life while sacrificing his own. But there's another story, more metaphorical, more alternative, that will rile those who enjoy the simple stories. Because I'm not convinced Lew was headed up there, the good place, at first. He had to earn his wings. He had to suffer by watching a little girl dying. This is Death, not your therapist. His price for redemption is just a little higher. Death knew where Lew was vulnerable when it came to him and children. It's written in the book. It wasn't enough to have him offer up his life. No, Death made him dance, made him perform his pitch for the angels. It had to be good. This is why, when all things said and done, Lew gets to go to heaven. While some of you feel you want to toss some luggage around, ask yourself, why when Lew was freed from death at midnight, did he continue to see the Grim Reaper? Because Death sees the future, and Lew was doomed or destined for redemption from the very beginning. I also like the little touches with the toy robots. The episode opens with them, possibly symbolizing a piece of Lew's soul. They represent him in many ways. They are his means of support. They give happiness to children, and one comes to life as soon as Maggie recovers after midnight. It's a part of Lew, a part of his life energizing the robot as his soul departs to Earth. It's a symbol of saying goodbye. Did you happen to notice Lew experienced the 5 stages of grief? Though the theory wouldn't be introduced by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross until 1969, 10 years after One for the Angels aired, we see Lew perform all the traits: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. And in strange coincidence, Kubler-Ross supported hospice care because she wanted people to complete their unfinished business. Much of the episode is focused between Lew and Death, or Lew and children, and I kind of wanted to see that he was otherwise invisible, metaphorically speaking, to adults. This would represent his retreat from the world, how important children were to him, and otherwise stress what a terrible salesman he was. But alas, he does speak with the driver who hit Maggie. We see a pedestrian talking to him early in the episode. Then there's a doctor, the last person to have spoken with Lew, which leads us to a question for the angels. What happened to Lew's body when he died? Did he fulfill his destiny and pass in his sleep? Or did he vanish from the earth? Will the doctor go around swearing he spoke to the ghost of Lew? That would sound awfully silly, unless you were in the Twilight Zone. Though One for the Angels was the 2nd episode to air, it was the 8th produced. I like to think because it wasn't as dour as the 2nd episode made, The Lonely, because it wasn't a downer and perhaps too soon to revisit the theme of isolation. Nevertheless, it's not a bad episode, but it's not a great one either when compared to other entries. Whether Ed Wynn could pull off a slick talking salesman is documented in the Twilight Zone Companion by Mark Scott Zickery. Ed Wynn was likable and sympathetic, and you kind of feel for him, that he was chosen to, leave the Earth perhaps a little early. The episode comes across as predictable and stilted, claustrophobic with its small sets, tight shots, and sometimes felt like watching a stage play through a straw. And for goodness sakes, why did no one take Maggie to the hospital? I never forgave the episode for pulling a faux pas, having Death break the 4th wall. The Grim Reaper, to me, had a personality of a slimy small-town mayor. Moving on, while I wish the episode could have thrown in quick foreshadowing about runaway trucks or children playing in the streets, at least it had nice touches with shadows blanketing Maggie and animated robots. One of many subtle references to Forbidden Planet, no doubt. I reluctantly give it 2 dimensions out of 5. It's worth a watch, but it's a little dry after repeated viewings. It does introduce a new trope when a protagonist never had a chance. Tag it, doomed from the start. There are many great channels that discuss the Twilight Zone. If you made it this far, I thank you. This is Mr. G of Synergy saying, if you happen to run into someone on a dark street, Desperate to sell you junk, overpriced and overhyped, best be aware his price may come with hidden costs, currency that can only be paid in the Twilight Zone. Check out other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching.